Hi, this is Teddy, and today you are listening to Andria McClellan in Virginia on Two Broads Talking Politics. Get your vaccine and keep wearing a mask.
Hi, everyone. I am Kelly, and this is Two Broads Talking Politics. I am on today with Andria McClellan, who is running for Lieutenant Governor in Virginia this year, 2021. So, hi, Andria.
Hi, how are you, Kelly?
I am great. So I want to ask you all about what the heck a lieutenant governor does. But first, let's talk a little bit about you. So you are on the city council in Norfolk, Virginia. Tell me a little bit about your background and why you're running for lieutenant governor.
Sure. So my family moved to Virginia when I was about 7 to Virginia Beach, which is a neighboring city to Norfolk. And we moved here for my dad's job. And unfortunately, a few years after we arrived, my dad left. And my mom was a single mom, all of a sudden had to make ends meet for my brother and me. And at that point, she had never worked outside of the home. She had never gone to college, and she went back to our local community college and took a couple of classes and became a technical illustrator and worked for a local government contractor. That experience is one of the things that drives me as lieutenant governor to want to focus on workforce development and supporting our community colleges. I went to great public schools here, very large public schools. I attended Green Run High School. I graduated in a class of 850 kids my senior year. It's where I got my start in politics. I was student council president, and it was a great experience. Went on from there to the University of Virginia, and fortunately through 4 years of work study jobs and Pell Grants and some student loans was able to graduate, and then worked in corporate America and industrial sales and marketing, and really didn't think at that point that I was going to get into politics, but was more focused on business. Had the opportunity to go back to Wharton and do a 2-year part-time program there while working full-time, and got bitten by the entrepreneurial bug and left corporate America and ran 2 small startup companies and had some success and some major failure, which we could talk a little bit more about. But as I look around, as we emerge from this COVID economy, I think there are going to be a lot of companies who have struggled, as I have in the past, and will need access to capital for small businesses. And so definitely want to focus on that as well. When I returned back to the Hampton Roads area, I saw a lot of families who were struggling as my mom had. And so I decided to get involved and volunteered for several organizations and helped raise money for victims of domestic violence and homeless families and prisoner reentry programs. And then in 2008, got bitten by the political bug again and became a precinct captain for my local Democratic committee to help President Obama get elected. And since that time, I've been organizing and helping Democrats up and down the ballot. And then in 2016, I had the audacity to run against a 16-year incumbent for the Norfolk City Council. And despite being told to literally wait my turn and that it wasn't my time, I wouldn't raise enough money. I beat him in 19 of 23 precincts. And I now represent 125,000 Virginians, which I'm running for lieutenant governor in a very crowded field. There are 8 of us in this primary, but I represent the largest constituency of anybody running. So I'm ready to take on a statewide opportunity now and continue the work that I've been doing on expanding access to broadband, tackling climate change issues, helping small businesses and workforce development, and very excited about the opportunity to be here with you today.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this election. Virginia has these off-year elections, so it's 2021 instead of 22 when a lot of states are. And the lieutenant governor is a completely separately elected position from the governor, not just in the primary, but in the general too, right? There could theoretically be a split ticket in the general.
Yes, and there have been many instances where that has occurred. I think with our very hyper-partisan world that we live in now, I would be shocked if that were to occur, but it has definitely been the case where we've had a Republican governor and Democratic lieutenant governor and vice versa.
So you've got this, as you mentioned, crowded field for the primary, which is in June. So what do people focus at all on lieutenant governor? Do people think about who's running for lieutenant governor? And how do you sort of set yourself apart? How do you make sure that people have heard of you and know who you are and will elect you in the primary?
First of all, let's face it, most of our country, and Virginians included, are hungover from 2020's elections. And so it has been challenging to get the attention of people because they're just raw and tired and numb from the craziness that has happened in our country. It's a lot of working within the network that I've built over the years because I've worked at the local, regional, state, and quite honestly, national levels. As women, we do a pretty good job generally of networking. And it's now time to call every one of those people that I've ever met and some whom I've not, and reintroduce myself and get them involved and excited about the campaign. I'm the only person from my region. We call it the Hampton Roads region, which is the second largest voting bloc in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that sets me apart. I'm also the only candidate who comes from a local elected background. And I think that's really important because typically what happens is at the state level, sometimes there's a lack of understanding of how cities and counties and towns work. And the state legislation doesn't always translate. We get unfunded mandates. We have issues with some of just not understanding the ins and outs. So bringing that skill set to the table, I think is really important. And in Virginia, the last person to have that background serving as lieutenant governor was Tim Kaine. So Tim Kaine, now Virginia senator, previously Virginia governor and lieutenant governor. And prior to that, he was on the city council in Richmond and served as mayor of Richmond. So it worked well for him. I think it worked well for me. The other thing that's interesting in Virginia, and perhaps not interesting, but sad, is that we've never elected a woman as lieutenant governor or governor. Indeed, we've only elected one woman statewide in the history of Virginia. And that was back in the late 80s and early 90s when we elected Mary Sue Terry for Attorney General. So I'm ready and excited to break that glass ceiling and to make a difference there too.
So what is the role of lieutenant governor then in Virginia? It must not be, if it's completely separately elected, must not be just doing whatever the governor says. So what is this role and what do you hope this role will be when you're elected?
I appreciate you distinguishing between what is it and what it could be, because I think that's important. The role is very similar to the vice president in that the lieutenant governor presides over the Senate, breaks ties in the Senate. And in Virginia, we have a General Assembly session that is either 45 days or 60 days a year. We have alternate between those odd and even years. So for the approximately 10 months of the year when you're not presiding over the Senate, you have a statewide platform. You don't have legislative power outside of breaking ties, and you don't have true executive power, but it is considered a part-time role. And so other previous lieutenant governors have had full-time jobs as well. I endeavor to make this a full-time job for me. So to be very accessible, to be out throughout the entire Commonwealth, visiting constituents. And so recognizing you have that statewide platform, I'd like to focus on a couple of key issues and to try and bring resources to bear for Virginia being the best and the brightest. So I'd love to tackle access to broadband. This is something that I've been working on for several years within our region, but the COVID crisis has certainly showed that the digital divide exists, and now it is a chasm. And so we have to ensure that all Virginians have access to high-speed internet, and it has to be affordable. Oftentimes we talk about our unserved rural areas only, and we have to continue to make sure that they're connected. But in cities like Norfolk, where 25% of our homes don't have access to high-speed internet because it's not affordable, we have to work on the underserved communities as well. So I really stress that affordability piece. It affects our kids going to school. It affects seniors getting a COVID vaccine registration, people being able to access telehealth, obviously workers working remotely, our agricultural industry. So I would love to think of this as a moonshot for Virginia, and we should strive to become the most connected state in the country. So that's one area. I mentioned workforce development and supporting our community colleges and our trade schools. I think a lot of people are going to need to be retrained and upskilled as we come out of this economy, and supporting small businesses. Of course, the environment is a huge issue for me. It's been one of my main focuses on city council. I don't know if you know this, Kelly, but Norfolk in our region is second only to New Orleans in terms of flood risk. The road that I drive to City Hall several times a month, several days a month, when it is sunny outside, is now flooded because of sea level rise. Norfolk's also home to the largest naval base in the world. So we have 40 to 50,000 sailors and civilians traversing our roads every day. And several of those roads, those main arteries, are often flooded during our big storms. We also have one of the busiest seaports on the East Coast. So we have a lot of trucks going in and out, carrying the goods throughout the rest of the Commonwealth. So it's an economic development engine. So flooding has got to be addressed. And we've got to be working on both reducing our carbon footprint so that we can reduce future flooding, but also taking into consideration adaptation measures to start to put in place some of the green and the gray infrastructure to deal with flooding. So definitely at the state level, I would want to focus on that because actually, while Norfolk is a coastal community, obviously we're thinking about flooding from a sea level rise standpoint. Throughout the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, flooding is now becoming an issue because of these rain bombs that we're seeing. These huge precipitation events where you're getting multiple inches of rain in an hour and it's overflowing infrastructure in central and southwest Virginia and our rivers there. So, I would love to stand up a Commonwealth flood board and be focused on that issue statewide. Do you have any flooding issues where you live, Kelly?
We have a lot of flooding issues in Chicago. That is an infrastructure problem more than a climate change problem in Chicago, though.
It is a combination of both and a very expensive problem that hopefully we'll start to be able to address maybe with some real infrastructure dollars with the new administration. I'm very excited about that opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned earlier that as you were in this entrepreneurial world that you had some successes and some failures. I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that and what perspective that gives you when you are thinking about representing Virginians.
Sure. So the first company when I left sort of the comfortable corporate world was a small startup client of mine and took on the role. We made CD and DVD packaging, which sounds so quaint nowadays, very vintage, and had some great successes there, signed some international licensing deals, had our products in Radio Shack stores, also a blast from the past. And then my husband and I made a decision to move back from LA, where I was running the company, to Virginia to be closer to our family when we were pregnant with our first son, and he had an opportunity back here. So when I had a 6-month-old at home, the gentleman who was my main investor in the first company asked me to write a business plan for an idea he had. It was called Civic Zone, the company was, and we made websites and communication tools for cities and counties and towns, sort of like Squarespace, but back in 1999. And I had $1 million in seed funding, and we had up to 22 employees at our height. And this was when the tech.com phase was just in its full gear on, really things were growing leaps and bounds until they weren't in 2000 when the tech bubble burst. And so I was, going around the country talking to venture capital firms, and then they didn't return calls anymore because everything sort of came to a screeching halt. And so we ran out of runway. And I had to lay off 22 employees and declare corporate bankruptcy. And that was very humbling. At that point, Andria, the overachiever, who had lots of successes in her life, had one major failure. And I learned a lot from it. And so I have worked since that time to help entrepreneurs. I actually chaired the Small Business Advisory Board for the state in the mid 2000s. And then I'm very active in our local angel community and our local accelerator, helping small businesses to get started and to grow and to thrive, but trying to ensure that other people don't have the same fate that I encountered. But you know what? There are a lot of companies right now who have had to shut down or who are barely, hanging on. So it's going to be very interesting as we come out of this economy. How do we provide them not only access to capital, but opportunities for procurement at the state and the local level, mentoring services, networking services, a lot of wraparound to ensure that they're successful. And again, back to broadband, as we consider all these startup companies that ideally would happen not only in our metropolitan urban areas like Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, but throughout some of the beautiful cities and towns and smaller counties that we have, they would locate there because of great quality of life. But if they don't have access to high-speed internet, it just doesn't work. So that's really an infrastructure issue that's foundational to the success of our economy.
So I wanted to ask too about what campaigning is like right now in this moment where some people are vaccinated, some people aren't. We're starting to loosen some restrictions, maybe shouldn't loosen quite as many. And this primary is in June.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like? How are you able to campaign? What are the sort of challenges that you're facing right now with that?
It looks like the Hollywood squares of a Zoom screen a lot, you know. Good news and bad news, right? I am by nature an extrovert. I love being around people. I love to shake hands and, hug the people that I know well. That's obviously out the door. But because we have a very large state and typically I'd be in a car driving to all these locations, I now have the ability to be, from Abingdon, Virginia to Arlington in a matter of 5 minutes because it's just changing a different URL to a different Zoom screen. There's been an opportunity as well for all of the candidates to appear more frequently all together. So the contrast is more readily available to voters who show up for these Zooms. But the question is how many people of those who actually are going to show up for these Zooms, and people are going to show up at the June 8th primary and may not have seen us or in advance. We are going to start knocking on doors and doing either lit drop or sort of socially distanced door knocking. I think at the end of the day, it is important to have that voter contact, but we'll be very respectful and step away and be masked, etc. So we're in a bit of a transition. By the time the general election comes around in November, I think we're going to be almost back to normal. But before June 8th happens, I just don't see that as the case. And Kelly, in Virginia, in order to get on the ballot, we have a requirement to collect 10,000 petition signatures in order to appear on the ballot. And as you can imagine, collecting those in person during a pandemic is very difficult. So fortunately, the State Board of Elections made the decision to allow us to, one, reduce the number to 2,000 signatures and provide an option for an electronic version. So we were allowed to collect a lot of those online. I made it on the ballot this past week, so I'm happy there. But as a result, I think it has lowered the bar for all the candidates. So I imagine we'll see all the candidates on the actual ballot. We've also started early voting in Virginia, allowing no excuse absentee voting happened for the first time in 2020. As a result, the ballots will start going out 45 days in advance of the June 8th primary for anybody who requests an early ballot. I don't see that we're going to see as much early voting as we did in the November 2020 election, but it's you've just got to anticipate that voting actually starts now April 24th, and your get out the vote, your GOTV, is for 45 days. So that makes life very exciting, and also requires more resources as a result too.
What can our listeners do to help your campaign then between now and April 24th, and then from then until the primary?
Well, I would love for folks to take a look at my website. It's Andria for Virginia. It's Andria with an I. Thanks, Mom, for wanting me to have a unique name spelling. And that would be great. We need volunteers, and because everything's virtual, people can phone bank and text bank all over the country. And we, of course, need the resources. And so donations would absolutely be welcome to help elect the first woman lieutenant governor in Virginia. I would love that. I think it's such an interesting place, Kelly, because I know that I have the experience of 30 years from private sector and the public sector, nonprofits, the environment, to be the best lieutenant governor there is. And I always struggle with whether or not we focus on being a woman or not. It's an interesting place to be because I'm qualified regardless of my gender, but it is about time, way past time, that we had a woman lieutenant governor. So at any rate, I'm excited to have been on your show and to be abroad today.
Absolutely. And we will put the links to your website and your social media on our website so people can find those as well.
Well, this has been great fun. And as a fellow mom of boys who are trying to raise young men who are who understand and are respectful and who support and elevate women. One of the things that's been great for me by running for office is I really wanted my boys to see a strong woman leader. I wanted to model that for them. They've been knocking on doors and canvassing since they were your kids' age. When they were, I think my first election, my youngest was 7 or 8, and he made campaign signs in my office. My teenage boys canvassed with me and made phone calls. And of course, I made my husband do all of that as well, too. So it's great to get the family involved. And I think it's a great civics lesson. My kids know how things work locally and at the state level and federal level as a result.
A couple of years ago, my younger son said, "Can boys be senators too, Mommy?"
Oh, I love that.
I said, "Well, they can."
What a great question. Oh my goodness. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun. And yes, it's about time that Virginia had a woman governor and lieutenant governor.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it. You have a good day and be well.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.